Call this meeting to our order with our apologies for the delayed start. Adila, if we can get a roll call. Tanya Rudy. Here. Cohen.
Here.
Mendoza.
Here.
Halpern.
Here.
Hernandez.
Here.
Chow.
Here.
Cartha. Here. We will start with some superintendent and board remarks. Dr. Gorin, if you want to go ahead and.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I have two sets of comments that I want to provide tonight. Let me start. I'd like to take a moment to address our equity efforts here in District 65. Recently, there was an article in the National Review challenging one of our schools and one of our principals of color for convening racial affinity groups. I want to state clearly that I strongly support this work across our district. Our goal is to deepen racial consciousness, to better support and meet the needs of our students and our families. Our racial equity work strives to improve academic outcomes for children of color, to create an inclusive and welcoming environment for our historically marginalized communities, and to foster a level understanding and respect of the various cultures represented by our community. In order to do this work, our school district has adopted a racial and educational equity statement. It states clearly that, and I quote, District 65 recognizes that excellence requires a commitment to equity and to identifying and addressing practices, policies, and institutional barriers, including institutional racism, that perpetuate opportunity and achievement gaps. The district must work proactively to acknowledge racial and cultural biases and eliminate institutional structures and practices that affect student learning and achievement. End of quote. As part of this commitment, we are engaging staff in two-day Beyond Diversity seminars and monthly SEED, Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity classes. Part of these trainings include the convening of racial affinity groups for dialogue on race, racism, and cultural bias. As a white male and as superintendent of this district, I stand behind this work and currently participate in a racial affinity group through my SEED training. Staff, as well as families in our schools, some for several years, have used racial affinity groups as a method to have courageous conversations about race and bias. I am strongly supportive of our administrators, educators, and equity champions across the district and the efforts they are undertaking to address race and racism in an open and honest manner. If anyone has concerns about our district's efforts on racial consciousness and racial identity, you can address your concerns and questions directly to me. That said, we will continue this work across the district as we remain committed to equity training for all staff. And I will look forward to my next SEED session where I can continue to participate in my own racial identity group. Let me pivot to another set of comments. We have not met as a board and as a leadership team since February 14th, when the senseless violence occurred at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, leaving 17 people killed and an additional 17 injured. Words alone cannot express our sympathies to the families of those affected, to the students who attend the high school, and to the educators that work in that building. I would like to offer that we take a short moment of silence to remember and honor the brave students and educators who lost their lives that day. Thank you. I want to recognize the Parkland students who have spoken out since mid-February and the outstanding work of Broward Superintendent Robert Runcie, who I knew when he worked here in Chicago. Thank you, students, and thank you, educators, for your leadership. At next week's board meeting, we will provide the board and the public with an overview of our emergency preparedness in the district. In addition, I want to state and clearly state, and I will continue to state to the board and the public, that I will never bring forward a recommendation to arm educators and staff members in our school buildings. We will remain on alert, practicing and refining response procedures. We will work to improve school climate and build and sustain lasting relationships with children and adults. And we will proactively work with our first responders at Evanston and Skokie Police and Fire, as well as with our district and school crisis teams to ensure that necessary safety measures are in place across the district. But we will not harm our educators. This Wednesday, our schools engage in a moment of peace at 10 a.m. to stress the importance of safety, the importance of communication, and the importance of relationships between students and adults in our schools. I will be joining several of our school teams during that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gorin. Recently, the district became aware of a possible violation of board policy regarding prohibited political activity. Per board policy, the superintendent and I sought the guidance of legal counsel, who advised us to conduct an initial review of district emails relevant to the allegation. This initial review uncovered multiple emails from a board member, both from district and campaign accounts, as well as from campaign representatives, to and from district employees at their district email addresses, some of which alluded to campaign work being discussed or requested during work hours. This raises concerns about violations by both the board member and district employees of board policy and state ethics laws. Specifically, Board Policy 2105, which mirrors the Illinois State Officials and Employees Ethics Act, prohibits, among other things, the following. 1, employees from participating in any political activities during compensated time. 2, board members and employees from intentionally using any district property or resources in connection with any political activity. Or 3, board members or employees requiring any other board member or employee to perform any political activity as part of that board member's or employee's duties. Further, the Illinois Local Governmental Employees Political Rights Act prohibits employees from engaging in political activities while at work. To effectively govern this district and maintain the public's trust, this board must hold itself to a high level of transparency, honesty, and accountability. This holds true for us both as a public governance body, but also as individual board members. It is our ethical duty to our community and under the law to investigate and hold ourselves and the district's employees accountable for any violations of our own policy. Thus, on the strong advice of legal counsel, the superintendent and I have directed the board's attorneys to conduct a review to determine the extent to which board policy and state statutes were violated. The board's attorneys will provide their findings to the superintendent and the board. And as permitted by law and advised by our attorneys, we intend on sharing the results of our attorneys' review. In the meantime, all board members and employees have been reminded of the requirements and restrictions of Policy 2105 and of the related state laws. Are there any additional board comments? Okay, then we will move on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the board during open public meetings. The Board of Education will not permit the voicing of personal attacks against any district employee. Please remember to state your name and that you have 3 minutes to address the board. And our first speaker will be Rob Grossinger.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and as they say, timing is everything. Superintendent, listening to the 2 comments you made at the beginning is why I live in Evanston. Thank you, and it humbles me that anything I say following those 2 points is going to seem trivial at best. And also, Madam President, bringing up the issue of political activity and the code of conduct and the laws that you mentioned was what I was going to talk about, but you were very eloquent and did it much better than I could. I would like to posit one thing for the board to think about. There is a very fine ethical line when one is in one position running for another position, and it's hard to navigate that line. And you even, as you brought up, mentioned a number of different sections of different laws and different rules, and following those sometimes, even for seasoned political people, seems to be problematic. What I would ask you to think about is clarifying your code of conduct and possibly even creating a second section which deals specifically with when one in a position of board membership tries to run or does run for another office. I think being clearer in that code of conduct might be helpful. The extreme would be to say, look, if you're going to run for another office and you use your position on board membership to run for another office, as soon as you're an official candidate for another office, you should resign from the school board. That may be extreme, but I would just ask that you think about putting this in a single place so that there can be no statements of, I didn't know, I didn't understand, it was a simple this or that. And I think it'll help future board members navigate both where they want to go politically and where the board wants to monitor activities that their colleagues are undertaking with that. But I think more importantly, again, I just want to thank the superintendent. I came here and heard something wonderful, which is again why I live here.
Thank you. Elliot Zeshin. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Oh.
Yes, I'm Elliot Zeshin. I'm a longtime resident of Evanston, and I've been civically involved for many years in Evanston issues and in local elections. So you pretty much took away the gist of my statement about the alleged, I don't know if we call it a violation, but or inadvertent act on the part of campaign manager to contact the district and seek help in a candidate's candidate who is on this board. What I'm wondering about, so I'm delighted to hear this statement, what I'm wondering about is what was the situation before? In other words, when I heard and I read in the Daily Northwestern that the superintendent's executive assistant went ahead and forwarded this email to other members of the staff, I thought to myself, if I were in that situation, I would have asked my boss, is that all right for me to do? It would not have seemed something that I would want to have on my own responsibility. So I'm really wondering, it's great to have this in place now, and I think it ought to be very clear that any activity of this kind violates both laws and codes, and that so that somebody can't come and say, oh, I made an honest mistake, it was inadvertent. I'm willing to believe that, but if these kinds of regulations were very clear, nobody should have any doubt. So that's what I would urge, that whatever the outcome of this investigation is, that this statement be something that every employee of the district knows about, not just they got a piece of paper, but they in some way have to indicate they've read the statement and it's on record that they've read the statement. And then it's not just this election. The school board elections create a lot of controversy in this community. I think as citizens who vote in those elections and vote to raise taxes, as I did, I think we need to know that everybody's playing by the rules, and that so there's no question about the conduct that people are engaging in. I think Evanston represents that kind of place, and I'd like to feel certain that as we go forward, this kind of thing won't happen. And I just say, as many of you probably realize, what's going on in the election for the 17th District House seat is to me, very demoralizing. I've never seen a campaign in Evanston that I can remember that was so negative, and I really do feel that what happens is that people will turn off. And I know Ms. Chow has been attacked in a way that I can't believe, but I really think that shows how the environment can be created and undermined, and then people will lose faith in our democratic practice. So thank you very much, and I hope to hear further about these getting this word out. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on. Sergio, if you've got the approval.
Sure. I move that the Board of Education amend the personnel action item on tonight's meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Cartha,
Yes. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on then. Anya, can you read number 6? It's on the flip side.
I move that the Board of Education adopt the resolution for non-renewal of administrative staff.
Second. Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Cartha,
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. We will move on to our discussion item about the school calendar. Beatrice, do you want to preface that for us?
Sure. So the
Microphone.
Do you have a microphone?
I'm okay. The 2017-2018 school calendar is being brought to the board again. We had a school closing on February 9th, and the calendar that is currently in place would have us have June 5th as an emergency, as a day of instruction for students. We've reviewed the calendar and some needs that we have moving forward, and we're proposing that the last day of students would be Monday, June 4th, but that for employees, they would come, our 10-month employees would come on June 5th, and that day would be used as a day of school improvement, and that there'd be several activities or professional learning opportunities for staff to participate in. One would be school safety and crisis training. Another opportunity would be to work on school climate teams and improving relationships and professional learning around that. And so we are asking for the board to approve an amended calendar for the 17-18 school year. And then looking forward to the 2018-2019 school year, Dr. Gorin mentioned in his opening statements that we are committed to our training around equity and having all of our staff participate in the 2-day Beyond Diversity trainings. We've had some challenges getting all of our licensed staff through that, just with regards to substitutes and being able to release teachers from the classroom. So we looked more closely at the 2018-19 school calendar, and what we're proposing is that we would have teachers actually, instead of having 2 days of a student institutes, for teacher institutes, we would actually have 4. And so that would allow, in those first 2 days coming back, we would be able to get, I think, all of our remaining deck members through that training. We would also be getting our new teachers through that training during new teacher orientation time. So that additional time would really help advance our training. And what that would mean is that students would then, they would also end, I believe it's June 3rd. And so essentially it's shortening the instructional year for students. So they would have 174 days of instruction as opposed to 176. And we're just recommending that for the 18-19 school year so that we can get all of our teachers through this training. And I don't know if you have anything you want to mention about.
Absolutely. So the school climate team recommendation and the school safety, we've talked with our union in terms of just, as you know, the climate in the world and really accelerating the time to prepare. We've been talking with the Evanston Police Department to identify resources to make sure that we can go through what's called the ALICE training, and having as many of our staff members before the end of the close of this year have gone through the training. And so Evanston Police Department has done, is pretty committed to working with us. We may not be able to get every single staff member, but to get a significant portion so we can be more prepared. And we want to combine that with really the other part of safety, which is really school climate safety, and being able to convey and help promote and calibrate all our systems across the district around PBIS and school climate work, and give our opportunity to end the year with some clear goals for us to work together for next year.
And in starting the new school year with continuing the equity training, as I referenced, we'd also have opportunities to go deeper into some of our culturally relevant teaching strategies as well for many of the teachers and staff who've already participated in the diversity training. And the 174 days still fits and abides by state code.
Yes, it does, because we have a waiver. We had applied for a waiver several years ago, and we wanted to take election day as a full day of school improvement. So we still have a waiver, and so we are fully in compliance. And the other thing I would mention is that our start dates for the 2018-19 school year would still be the same as District 202 also.
I had two questions, if I could. One is, can you define Alice? Sorry, it's not a test.
It's based on the FEMA recommendations around run or hide or fight, which are recommendations that the way in which we respond, our traditional standard goals are drills are a code red or a lockdown. This would shift to a much more dynamic emergency preparedness for an active shooter.
So role-playing different types of things.
So they would walk through essentially first the mindset and then role play, yes.
Awesome.
After Sandy Hook and in light of the Parkland tragedies, but we as a district and the law enforcement agencies are really ratcheting up the need to make sure that we're all on board.
I love that. And for the calendar, what are those 2 days at the front end of the year if they're not at the front of the year?
Those are the last 2 days of summer.
Yeah, so we're basically asking teachers to return 2 days earlier than they usually do.
They're
so
not
that they would
embedded-
have 4 days of institutes in training.
You're adding 2 days on the front end.
We're adding 2 days
They're
at
not
the
coming
front
from
end.
anywhere in the year.
They're not, no.
It's not like taking an institute day from October.
No, we're not.
Okay.
We would still have our early release Wednesdays, and
Great.
we would not be taking
Okay,
any of
thank you.
So
Any other
so
questions?
that would be August 14th and this year, is that?
It'll be August 21st and 22nd of the
Yeah, I believe it's a
2018-19.
Tuesday and Wednesday.
And the first day for kids is the 27th.
Yeah, you might not be looking at 18-19.
So if you go to
I see.
Tuesday and
21st through
Wednesday.
the 24th would be the 4 days, okay.
Are there any other questions?
What is the teacher feedback on the proposal for the calendar change?
Well, we did speak to the union regarding that, and they were in favor.
And strongly in favor of taking the snow day, makeup day to do the professional learning on culture, relationships, and safety.
So just to clarify, the last day of school is still going to remain for this school year. It's going to stay Monday, June 4th.
For students and families.
So despite the snow day, students do not have to make up that day. It will be a teacher professional learning day around the safety and school climate issues.
Correct.
So because I think parents have been asking that, so we can be clear on that. And then I think too on the 2 days of equity training that's going to happen at the start of the year, in addition to the 2 days that are Teacher Institute days before students return in any case. So at the end of that, at that point, all of our staff will have been trained in Beyond Diversity. Is that accurate?
All of our teaching staff who are DEC members, so all of our teaching
Okay.
staff will be trained, and
Okay.
many of the other staff in different classifications will be trained.
Okay.
But then it's a much more manageable
Got it.
way of doing the lift to get everybody on the same wavelength.
Got it. So there will still be some
There'll still be some
staff that will, throughout the year,
Right.
there will still be offerings to get them
Right.
trained.
And one of the
Okay.
things, I think many people know this, that the commitment of our teaching staff to sign up for Beyond Diversity is great, but if we do it during the year, it calls for substitutes. There's a substitute shortage everywhere we can see, including here in District 65, as we know. And so it calls for a tremendous amount of substitutes. By doing the training during those 2 days when kids aren't in school yet, we're able to get the lion's share of remaining colleagues trained without testing the substitute waters.
No, and I think that's fantastic. And I know that's something that we've talked about over the last few meetings that we've had as a leadership team. So I want to thank you and thank DEC leadership for finding a workable solution to it. So I think that's fantastic that is going to be happening. Are there any other questions or comments?
Have we thought of if there'll be any significant impact to 2 less days of instruction for students?
So that's a great question and point. Looking at other ways, I think also there's also that impact on what the level of instruction is when we're pulling teachers out of the classroom and placing subs or sometimes not getting some coverage. So I think we had to weigh our options and felt that this was a better option of getting everyone trained. And I think just the other thing is that there are also trainings being offered over the summer. So we're really hoping that between summer for those who volunteer and can come in, as well as those 2 days up front, that we will be able to engage everyone in the Beyond Diversity. And for those who've already participate in Beyond Diversity, that they would have additional opportunities to explore culturally relevant and culturally responsive teaching. And we think that that will enhance instruction throughout the school year. So I appreciate your point about cutting the days. I think we're also just looking at, what other options do we really have, and not having the teachers present in the classroom also disrupts instruction.
I also appreciate the question. It's a really important one. And as Beatrice said, this is what we see as a special case to be able to do the lift on the equity training and maintain our commitments to that, and to move forward in a way that, again, if we try to do the equity training during the school year, we end up losing a certain degree of instruction just because of the substitute shortage and pulling people out of class.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you, Beatrice. And that is.
Do we bring this back for a vote next week?
It's coming back on the 19th for a vote, yes.
Right.
Correct.
And so I think what we want to do, and we had to wait till this board meeting to bring forward this recommendation. We, assuming that you as a board will vote in favor of this, the official announcement on that snow day makeup will come after next Monday's board meeting.
Correct, right.
And so I don't want to be presumptuous on your vote, but the public has heard what the directions are that we're going forward on.
Okay. Well, with that, I adjourn this working board meeting at 8:01 p.m. Now we'll turn to finance.
So I'll call the finance meeting to order at 8:03 p.m. And first order of business is action item related to the minutes. The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the February 5th, 2018 Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented. Have a second?
Do we need to do roll call first?
Yeah, roll call first.
Oh, sorry.
Tanya Booty,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
Chow.
Here. I'll say that again. So now, the Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the February 5th, 2018 Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented.
Second. Tanya Booty,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Chow.
Yes. Motion carries. The second item of action is a Headstart student transportation bid award. I'll go ahead and read the motion, and then if there's any discussion or questions, we can take that for the action. Finance Committee recommends that the bid for Headstart transportation services for fiscal year 19 to Compass Transportation be presented to the full board for approval.
Second.
Are there any questions about the memo? No? Okay. Hearing none.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes. Motion carries 3-0. And our third action item, it relates to the Student Transportation Services bid extension, which is, the Finance Committee recommends the extension with positive connections for in-district student transportation service for fiscal year 16 through fiscal year 18 be presented to the full board for approval. Is that correct? It shouldn't be fiscal year 16 to 18. It should be fiscal year 19 to 21. Is it 2 years? It's a 2-year extension, correct?
Yes, it's fiscal
Or
year
18,
19,
19.
fiscal year 20. I think they meant
It's a
to say
one-year
school
extension.
year.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it should read fiscal year 19 and 20?
yes.
Okay, I'll just restate it. The Finance Committee recommends that the extension with positive connections for in-district student transportation services for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 be presented to the full board for approval. Second?
Second.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm. So for positive connections, I recall that we have a challenge with getting bids for that contract. And is that the reason for the extension, or were there other factors that?
That was the main factor. And one of also an important variable is the rate of increase. It's in line with the rate of inflation, which in the past, when the district has opened up the bidding, you've actually ended up paying more because we're dealing with essentially one company. So we thought it was prudent to be able to lock in at the rate of inflation instead of taking a risk and bidding against ourselves essentially, because we only always get, it seems like, one bidder. If you saw the Headstart bid, we sent out to 27 companies, 27. And we only got bids from 35. So they're the only ones who have the capacity in this area to be able to service regular and special ed transportation.
The Head Start is different than, right, that was Compass, and this, and for
Regular
Gen Ed
transportation,
and.
right. And in addition to the fact that Compass was the lowest responsive bidder, we are hoping that by them getting to the district, we may be able to create competition down the road.
Correct.
For them to be able to compete for the regular and special ed transportation.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you wanna?
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes. Motion carries. So the next item is, oops, did you take? There's no discussion? All right, well, that's easy. Are there any questions about the FYI? If not, our next meeting is April 9th, 2018. And I would call this meeting of the Finance Committee adjourned at 8:10 PM. Thank you.
Thank you.